of impact on economy. But first and foremost, this is about human lives and well, resilience of health systems, so to say. So when we started a year ago, we're celebrating a year anniversary of this situation. There were people who were saying we're gonna learn our lessons throughout the spring period, and then in autumn we will be more prepared and everything will be smoother. Now we see that this is not the case. The government started office with 4,000 cases, new cases daily, with hundreds of people dying, with thousands of people in hospital beds. And every morning I was just watching, is there a space still left up to this a top line of the hospital system, so that we could admit more people to hospital beds and emergency care, intensive care units. So now this is a little bit subsided. However, I think that as in most of the countries in Europe, it seemed like a couple of months ago that we are having vaccines. Now there's the light in the end of the tunnel, and we just need to get vaccinated as soon as possible, and then everything comes back to normal. And virus said no. And we have 3 mutations that are, well, nobody can say actually how good those vaccines that we have or we can sort of modify will be for the sake of immunity of societies across the globe. So we are still in an uncertain situation. From what we know of the scientific research that has been done already, is that at least vaccines are quite effective in terms of preventing people dying and having severe conditions when they get COVID. And this is sort of a some at least relief, because then when you think about those quarantines and lockdowns and restrictions, well, you can maybe change your main idea. And after 2 months of the strict lockdown, I'm thinking that our main idea should be, we will cover as many elder people or people with severe diseases as possible. I mean, we can shelter them from death and severe situation if they get sick, and that's at most we can do. Because then it's for general society to decide how much they want to stick to some general rules or sane mind instruction, keeping distance, working remote, not contacting too many people, not visiting too many people. But I mean, this is very complicated to sustain people in lockdown for ages. So 1 month from now, 2 months from now, I think that at some juncture, all those pressures across the European countries, as well as in this country, will start to sort of go away. More and more business will be opening up. But then the question is, what will be the outcomes, or what will be the results of all this 1 year period? Because last year we saw quite a phenomenal situation of Lithuanian economy, but there are quite good explanations to that. I mean, there were people who were saying in spring 2020 that there will be a collapse of economy. So it never happened, given that people stayed within the country, so they did not send out their money to tourist destinations, and that was sort of a cushion pillow for a internal demand. At the same time, this that we considered to be weakness of our economy, this low to middle value added, appeared to be quite a good thing during the times of quarantine, because people still want to eat, they want to pot their flowers, they want to change their furniture, and that's how you did not get so much hit by decline of international trade if you compare to high higher value added. Of course, the segment that we have there, that is bio or medical science segment, was like flourishing on people's problems, well, enormously. And of course, that was good for those businesses and people who work there. And maybe also suggesting that this is the same as we believed, I think, throughout the years, that this is something where we should strengthen our strengths further, because this even if this situation goes away, there might be other situations where you will draw on those strengths and on your resources. And so that's how we ended up with a quite significant increase of income, quite low decline of GDP. Of course, the government was borrowing heavily and had a humongous deficit. And there, this is a difference from the previous crisis, where we had Litas, no euro perspective, no friendly policy from European Commission or Council or ECB. And all of a sudden, we had this change of ECB mindset already a couple of years ago with quantitative easing. Then you had all of a sudden European countries agreeing on fiscal stimulus, a real fiscal stimulus this time, not only packaging of money that exists and sort of wrapping up with the red button band and saying that this is a support package, but there is a real package of additional 750 billion euros. And now when I do have time to think about something else than COVID, my major headache is how to use the money wisely, because this is a hell of a lot of money. This is this Recovery and Resilience Fund. We have a new EU budget for 21-27, and we should do it not like we did it before. I mean, the problems that are there that need to be addressed, the quality of education, the quality of infrastructure, shift of economy towards higher value added is still there, and we need to push a lot on this. Of course, there is a sort of a strings attached from European Union saying that the use of your money should be at least 37% green and 20% digital. And I think that's huge as well, especially in terms of digital, because that was quite a big sort of part of our agenda, of our government agenda, about open data and digitalization of government services, but not only government, but general environment for businesses also going digital. This green agenda is a little bit more tricky, because there, I mean, it's popular to say green, but to be green is not just not to use the plastic thing that you drink your drink from, but this is much more complicated, given that there are costs that are quite significant, especially in terms of agriculture, for example, where you have a internal sort of argument with yourself. Do you want to increase productivity? Then this means more CO2. Or do you want to get CO2 down? Then it means that you have butter that costs maybe 10 euros per package, which is not sustainable for an ordinary pensioner who is going to a downtown shop to buy his or her food. So this is quite tricky, I must say, and we are working hard on this. So now we are in the period where we want to streamline our sort of the working plan for next 4 years. That will be public next week. We are still in the process of preparation. That will be public next week, and we hope to adopt it somewhere on 10th of March. This first half of the year, we will try to sort of create those relative programs in relative pieces of policies where we find our priorities, and this being education, digitalization, of course, the green course innovations, where we also have quite a big ambition, but also quite a winds that blow from different extreme sides, because there is the science or a high school part that would want to focus on fundamental research, and then this research that is needed for business, and business getting more and more innovative, and creating demand for what science is doing in this public sphere of universities or other institutions. So I think the agenda is quite well. I would say that it's quite similar to what other governments were saying. But my approach was that, look, people, we cannot do like hundreds of things. Let us pick some couple of things where we think that we can deliver, or at least we can put a train on the right track, and then the train will go with another government to the right direction. So this, as I said, is a couple of things. Of course, education first, then healthcare. Due to COVID, due to what we've learned, that would be quite a bad thing if we missed that opportunity and would not transform our health system into something more resilient than this situation showed that we have. And public service, which I find extremely important, given that very often this good ideas that the politicians are having are not transforming into real life, because the public service is quite demotivated and quite reluctant to take on some higher challenges, and usually are in this mood of let's do as we did before, and I think this is not the way how you can change things. In terms of vertical things, this is also innovation policy, and then we have a couple of things that are horizontal that we want to get throughout the all policies that I've named. That would be the green aspect, the digital aspect, the regional aspect. Not, of course, to extent that we want to have any region to be everything. I mean, we need to draw on strong sides, but not pretend that there will be 10 of Vilniuses or 10 of ports or 10 of whatever. That is not going to happen. But we need to have this regional approach in order to not to have all the people living just in Vilnius someday, because I don't think this
nice city.
This is a good idea, yeah, and then this motive of inclusion, how we include people who are now a little bit pushed aside from the from normal life. This, I mean, handicapped people, mothers raising kids with no spouse, where we know that groups of people are in the risk of poverty much higher than the general one. And this is not because we spend too little money on their payments for social security. We know that in most of the cases, this is because they cannot work. And this is the aspect that I think is extremely important, because it's not about just increasing the payouts from public budget, but it's more about making people able to come back to work and to earn their money. And this is about infrastructure in many cases, qualifications, and kid care if we talk about single parents. So this is basically the general line. You know, the devil is in details. I mean, I have a very young government. I'm one of the oldest in this government.
That's good. You are still younger than me.
Yeah, absolutely. I will be younger than you for the rest of my life, I think. So, but I mean, this is most of the ministers do not have that much of this public administration experience from their previous life. Some of them just came to politics, some of them were in politics but not in public administration. So this is a little bit challenging. But on the other side, on this positive side, I must say that they are also a hell of full of goodwill and readiness.
I learned that people who are not used to politics actually think things can be done, contrary to people who are in politics who tend to forget that things can be done.
Well, no, I would not agree. I would not agree because it depends. It depends on the leadership, I would say. Because if you believe that your colleagues are supporting you, then in most of the cases that can be done. But if you are a public servant and for so many times what you offered were never implemented because somebody was not clever enough to understand the point or was just lazy enough to argue and to try and persuade others, then of course you lose motivation. And this is my point exactly, where we need to get public service, not politicians, but the public service back on track and believing that actually things can be done if they show initiative and if they show the ways how to do things, not what to do, because sometimes they want to show what to do to politicians who do not know what they want to do. But if the politicians do know what they want to do, then the public servants just need to show them the way. And this encouragement, I think, is quite important. So that would be end of my monologue.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mrs. Prime Minister. Ms. Prime Minister, there are so many questions that we have received before this. And one aspect that I've noticed is that I have seen no questions regarding the COVID-19 situation.
Well, I've seen a couple. There was a question about vaccines, I think.
Yes, but the general, and there's a little bit regarding the healthcare system in general. But my feeling is what I see again in these questions from the members in the different chambers of commerce is the issue of foreign direct investment. Obviously, the members are very interested in that. How do we make Lithuania even more attractive?
Even more great again.
You know my answer, but I think we come from a situation now of a deep economic crisis and a societal crisis. And many people now have a very bleak outlook of the world in general. It feels like winter everywhere in the world, or at least in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe, in North America. But personally, I see us emerging from this very fast. I've talked about the COVID crisis in economic terms as unplanned, very bad and very expensive vacation. But when we return from vacation, we actually start working immediately. But we need to have some encouragement. So your government, what is your main objective to get optimism back among investors?
Well, I think that a lot depends on this sentiment that you mentioned, because I've heard people who are equally optimistic as you are, and I would want to be the same and try cautiously to be optimistic and look at it as some sort of vacation. Of course, all those issues with mutations and stuff sometimes brings me back on
more economists and less virologists.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, but in general, I do think this is a very good starting point to think that there will be life after COVID, and the question is how different that would be, because it will depend most probably on businesses. What we had last year, we had nearly a very low level of bankruptcies, and we know that this is not normal. I mean, even during the good times, businesses do come and go. Now we do not have this phenomena, meaning that the public support is sustaining something that is not sustainable in economic terms. So of course we will see some restructuring after COVID, for good or for bad. There will be some businesses where we will have a longer lasting puzzle. And I'm talking about all those businesses that are related to international travel, being that tourism, being that conferences, being that hotels, spas, whatever. I mean, it's hard to say how soon people will start to travel and when will they actually travel. And
welcome in Copenhagen.
Yeah, and will that model of online conferences be the main model for conferences in the future? Because it has multiple pluses for many people. So maybe that is, you know, the shift, the structural shift that will not change life back to where we were. And this is a separate story where I don't have a good answer. But in terms of the general industry and services and whatever activities we can think of, I think that we have a couple of approaches towards that. Definitely, if we were, I mean, I, as a member of Andrius Kubilius government, was a person so keen to bring as many investors to Lithuania as possible during the very bad time when nobody believed that we are not going to get bankrupt. So I can do even fries, or I don't know, 5 times more when I'm a prime minister, and the situation is not that bad. I mean, we have something to offer, but of course there are a couple of things that we need to get back and look at, and this is first and foremost education. The education system and the systems of how we connect business and universities in their research activities. I think we have quite good ideas to that. We will present that in public consultation next week. So anyone who's interested can join and listen whether we are talking things or rubbish. But I think in some countries that proved to be quite a good choice. So this is important. Also, we think about collecting a couple of activities where we can have this sandbox approach, something that we had in fintech, which I think was quite successful, where you have a good level of regulation. I mean, the reasonable level of regulation, and let people just try to set up their businesses in that sphere here. And I think there could be more activities where we would find this niche, being that innovations in, for example, green industries, being that digital things, because we have grassroots where you can actually build on. And of course, those big investments or big projects where that set up in free economic zones, in other parts of industrial parks or whatever, this we're gonna push further and support. We will try to persuade people who want to come and have more maybe working hands, not to set up in the capital, but maybe to use in other locations. Infrastructure will be strengthened to a large extent, I think, throughout the period, because of EU funding, because of RRF, because of those big pan-Baltic projects that are being implemented. So, but I think the most important thing is this general approach that investments are more than welcome here, because this way of getting upper via this ladder of value added with your internal means, it is much longer for this country than with the help of companies that come here and look for their location for their part of their business.
Yeah, there are lots of questions coming in here, but you know, I'm in charge here, so I will skip that. I will ask you a question or congratulate you on a view. You mentioned sandbox regulation. Maybe just to explain that is that the general principle in sandbox regulation is essentially it's a bottom up kind of regulation that you allow certain sectors, certain companies to have less regulation, more market-friendly regulation, and then work on that. And if it works, you expand it to more sectors, more companies, and so forth. There's been a lot of research on that recently. Something I follow very closely. I think I'm very happy to hear you bring up that issue. That in itself could be a webinar. And ask another question here. What kind of leadership would you like to promote in Lithuania? And before you answer that, I will share something that struck me while we were planning this. We had a planning meeting with the 6th Chamber of Commerce organizing this. There were 7 people on that planning meeting. I was the only male. The rest were female. And they weren't charged, by the way. I was just following the orders. And of course, you are a female prime minister, and you have had a female president. And it's more Scandinavian than Scandinavia. Is that part of the leadership role, or is that something different? I know you're not exactly, you believe in people's abilities and not necessarily the gender, but what kind of leadership aspirations do you have, or ideals would you like to promote?
Well, it's interesting to notice that out of 6, 8 Nordic, Baltic, and B8. So we have quite a bunch of ladies, bar from Sweden and Latvia, I think. And now when the government of Estonia has changed, we are in a very clear majority. But I think that's quite a coincidence, although in our case, all 3 parties, or the list of the parties, because I'm not the chair of the party, but I topped the list of conservatives during the elections. So both liberal parties were also are led by my 2 colleagues, Victoria and Aušrinė, and I think that might have had some impact on the results, but I would not overestimate that.
Now in Belarus, that the women have been in charge.
Yeah, but there you have a very clear contrast with Lukashenko, and whatever nice person is I think being male or female is just a very good view to your eyes, because it just have such a mess to compare with. So my point was that I actually want to have a government that would be balanced in terms of gender, maybe age, and sort of experience. I mean, that was not that I want to do it half and half. It just happened to be half and half, because if that were like minus one half or something like that, I would still be happy, because whatever it was times better than the previous government, where we had just 1 minister who was female. So I would think I'm going to have a times better result, but it just appeared that we can have a fairly balanced budget government, and so and this was my intent, that I want to have this diversity around the table, and I think this is useful, not just for the sake of diversity, but for the sake of people with different experiences, age perspectives, gender perspectives, whatever, having different approaches toward the same problem. And then you do not have this dictatorship thing, which I hate personally. I mean, people do say that I'm a sort of strong person, but I hate to dictate. I mean, I can make a decision which is not so typical for many politicians that do not want to take a decision sometime. They just want to hear the arguments and live in that argumentation forever. If I hear the arguments, I can make a decision at the end of the day. But I hate to impose. I mean, I very much believe in democratic exchange of views, and I think this is the way we will go through. because you know from our previous communication that, I mean, I must not agree with you, you must not agree with me, but I mean, we can always have a fair debate and maybe sometimes stay at the same points where we were. Maybe at some juncture come to some agreement, but I will never say that, you know, my point of view is the only right point of view. There is just one issue, freedom of my country, that is sort of non-discussable. Anything else is discussable.
Yeah, well, I'm still, I should say that in terms of questions, we are approaching, you know, we should actually go to the Q&A, and we actually started it a little bit, but just to remind the listeners, you can write your questions in the chat, and we'll try to follow up on that. There's one thing I have on my notepad here, and that's the unfortunate situation with the UK, in the sense that Britain has left us. I remember back when Lithuania was not in the euro, and when you were Minister of Finance, you had a great deal of communication with the British government, with the Scandinavian, or particularly the Danish and the Swedish government, with the Czech government at that time, because you were all outside of the euro area. With the Baltics in the euro area, with the UK leaving, do we change the internal discussions in euro so it becomes much more German francophone, which traditionally is a little somewhat in conflict with the way we see it in the Nordic Baltic Anglo-Saxon sphere of fiscal austerity, or I would say fiscal conservatism, and a free market approach, decentralization. Will we miss the Brits not only for their good humor, but also as a partner internally against some of these tendencies towards more centralization, less fiscally conservative, and more anti-free market approach?
Well, Germans would not agree with you, I think, when you talk about them being not fiscally conservative, because if Wolfgang Schäuble was not fiscally conservative enough, then I don't know who is, you know.
Well, yeah. you can call the Finns, and then they will tell you.
Okay, yeah. I know that there was a sort of certain shift during this pandemic and this debate about recovery fund and providing funding at European level. And there was this debate how wisely we use money. And there is still this question how demanding European Commission will be on the country's plans to implement the reforms, because you know that there is a big debate, especially in Southern Europe, on what are the plans. You have change of government in Italy, where my old friend Mario Draghi is now the chair of the government, which means that this is a very complicated situation, and they will have a very short lifespan to invent something really game-changing. Yes, I will miss Brits a lot. Not because of this fiscal conservatism, because they basically did not care a lot, and they have their own system with central bank being part of the government. So, you know, not something that would work well in my country, at least in the past.
That would scare me.
But what I think is important, there are two aspects that are important. One aspect is that here we see proof of this new reality, where actually social media, whatever memos can push a country as far as out of the European Union. I mean, because there was this debate about how much money do we pay into European Union, how not anything we get from European Union, and we will save that amount of money and put that to NHS. And then all of a sudden you have 3 years of a painful divorce where nobody benefits actually. And I'm very much in doubt whether UK will benefit, frankly, from this at some juncture in the future. But I will miss their fair approach towards all those regulative incentives where we were on the same page. usually, not about budget so much, because they were not so committed to European debate about Eurozone and stuff. But on this general regulative market approach, yes, it was extremely important voice around the table, and definitely we will miss it. And this is quite important, but that only brings us small countries that want to find their niches in this big picture, to be also cautious about whatever initiatives that tend to be protective and tend to be against internal market. And yes, there is this natural sort of core of Germany and France. This will not go away. I mean, this is the core. Those are big countries. But I think to a large extent, we smaller countries, Nordic countries, Baltic countries, we can offer some things that are of interest to those big countries as well, especially to Germany, who is maybe a little bit more flexible on implementing new things. We just had a chat with Chancellor Merkel, and she was joking on their digitalization and the progress that the country is making in this area. And she was frankly saying that, look, you are the countries where we can actually learn at least some things from. Estonia, us, Latvia, if we can make some decisions work on Poland-Baltic level, something that I strongly believe we can do, then I think this will be even better examples for European Union just to use that.
Yeah, I think actually in terms of digitalization in Germany, it's an interesting debate that they're having in Germany at the moment. The mayor of Rostock happened to be Danish. He has have a major drive for digitalization of local government in Rostock. And I think that when you're following German media, it comes up again and again. And I'm actually getting a question here. Exactly, you have already talked about the government's plans for digitalization, but maybe you could share a little bit more on some of the specifics.
Well, I will not talk about the particular project, because that was the approach that we found in the institutions when we came up. We get the list. We want to invest into state tax inspectorate, IT systems, this inspectorate, IT systems, this inspectorate, whatever. I mean, if we just let that go this way, then we would just spend more money into making those systems hyper. And I don't think this is the way. I mean, what we wanted to do, and we have a very committed persons here within the Prime Minister's office. There are a couple of issues that are important. One and foremost is the open data approach. It's something that I think would be quite a game changer if we actually push all public institutions towards the open data policy. And we use the data for decision making, and businesses can use the data for their business, for creating new services and new and some new products to their customers. And I think this is extremely important. So first thing what we want to do is to push actually to finger point to institutions who are having data, and sometimes are even unaware of it, to go through this path of opening up. Then when it comes to digital solutions or IT systems that the country is employing, we should not dig into our own holes as we did before, so that any institution has its own plans to sort of develop their decisions, but we must come to this integrated approach, something that actually Estonia has done, where you have a railway, and then all the lorries that are put on that railway are just put on that railway. You are not building the parallel railway for tax inspection, for building permits, for registry, for whatever. And this is, I think, is a very, very important approach, and widely understood by the members of cabinet, so that we would not dig into those holes anymore, and we will try to coordinate and integrate that at the higher level. And of course, we will need some institutional changes, strengthening the agency that we have that takes care of this portfolio that was a little bit maybe under-respected before. But given that there is a very clear frame coming from European Union on this digitalization package for RRF, then you actually need to change. Otherwise, you will not be able to use the money. So I think that will be a very good opportunity to have this horizontal approach where we actually are building a railway, the infrastructure. And all the other decisions are up to institutions, up to businesses, up to individual entities to sort of pop up and pop off whenever they want.
Yeah, so it's much more of a, often you would get a lot of governments just sending out a number of how much money they want to spend on it rather than objectives.
Yeah, and there were even more crazy things, because some people would think that if you make something PDF, then this is digitalization, which is so we need to eradicate sometimes even this.
Yeah, well, these things come up. And another thing in terms of questions, both those we're getting in now and the questions we received before, is questions regarding education. Mm-hmm. I'm a research associate at Copenhagen Business School, and when I walk around from time to time at the business school, there are a few languages I hear often, and one of them is Lithuanian, which always makes me happy, as you know. I love the fact that we have Lithuanian students at the Copenhagen Business School, in Denmark in general, that we have that in Europe in general. The students travel around Europe, but it's also a reflection to some extent that Lithuanian students don't find at home what they would like to find in terms of education. What's your main policy objective in terms of what we do with strengthening education in Lithuania?
Well, what you are talking about is this university level. So I think this is the level that had attracted so much attention throughout the recent 10 years. The real problems, in my view, is not even in that level. The real problems are in basic education, where we have a very big divergence and growing divergence between kids who are in the cities and kids who are not. And I think this is the issue that we need to address, but of course it takes quite a long time in sort of getting the infrastructure right, the schools at the right places, because the kids could not go to school if they have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, this is not the beginning of 20th century, so you still need to balance. But this issue is, I think, very important, as well as the issue of teaching of teachers. I mean, education for people who want to be teachers, because this is now not in the right on the right track. I mean, too few people want to be teachers. They usually use that option as a third one or fourth one out of all their choices. So which means that this is not a primary choice that I want to be a teacher, because, well, this is not an easy job, not a well remunerated job. And the conditions, if you are a city teacher, then you have like 35 kids in the class. If you are in a periphery, then you have to teach biology, English, and I don't know, whatever, physics at the same time. This is not how it should be. So I think the problems that are inherent in basic education, they go on because the best kids from schooling, they want then the good universities. And as you mentioned, there is a challenge to getting good tertiary education, at least in some areas here in your own country. Then you go and study somewhere else. So we already started with the studies a month ago, where we decided that we are lifting up the price for social sciences and humanitarian sciences, because before that, the difference between the most expensive studies and the cheapest studies, and those happen to be the cheapest studies, were like 9 times, meaning that it's cheap to go there, but at the same time, the institution, the university or college is not able to raise money to, for example, send over good teachers for the students. So you have a very low level of studies and quite many kids you need to enroll in order to have the budget. I mean, in order to function financially somehow. So what we decided to do, we decided to lift up the price of this social study because that was a quick thing that we could do for this schooling year. There were unhappy people who were saying now we will not be able to join universities because it will be too expensive. But maybe you want to do something else. I mean, maybe you want to study biology or IT or engineering or whatever that is well paid. Because from statistics, what we see, only 30% of those graduates actually find work in a job where they need the qualification that they get from their schooling. So the mismatch is very clear. So we are trying to at least clean the quick things, and then we will have to rethink the content of the contract with a high school or education. I mean, what is the parameters of quality that you provide in terms of science and in terms of education?
Yeah, one thing, you know, I often say to Baltic friends and clients and contacts and politicians that, you know, everybody in the Baltics are very eager to say we want to be like Scandinavia. But, you know, for example, in terms of education, we have completely free education, meaning paid by the taxpayers in Denmark, for example. We have very, very high subsidies or benefit levels to those who are studying. And that's, of course, is good in terms of getting many to get a higher education. But as you say, there is very, very little focus on what you get in return in terms of actually creating human capital. Mm-hmm. You need to avoid that education becomes consumption. It needs to be an investment in your own abilities for the future.
Yeah, and we had those changes that were made last year, which we had to unwind to a large extent, because with this getting further, we would have come to the point where the higher schools, those college schools, would become absolutely irrelevant because anyone would be actually a university student of business or management or law. And this is not how it's gonna be, because the difference should be bigger between university as a sort of where you go and train yourself with some at least scent of the scientific career, and then the colleges or professional schools where you actually can get a qualification and then get a job much quicker than if you want to go and get your PhD.
Yes, we have 8 minutes left on this discussion. I know that you, Ms. Prime Minister, has a appointment in 8 minutes. So I don't want to take too much of people's time here, but you know, maybe for the end of this, in terms of economic growth, you being a fellow economist of mine, I should remind the listeners about a joke we used to have. I always told the Prime Minister before she was a politician that when she became finance minister, she was now a politician. And you are now acknowledged you are now finally a politician. But I would like to ask the economist, you know, where do you see growth in Europe and in Lithuania in this year? You know, not numbers, but you know, the general, how fast will we return to get out of this crisis?
Well, it depends if that is this expensive vacations, if you, as you mentioned. So it means that vacations will go away and we will be back to normal. I mean, industry is functioning. Industry is functioning rather well. There are some internal consumption is not in 2009 situation, not close to it. I would be worried about some sectors that we were talking about, the particular sectors where I would see that the restructuring might be quite substantial. after we see that the flood is gone, and then can we sustain the model? Because there might be changes in consumption patterns. There might be people not coming back to some of the activities to a large extent, but of course a lot will depend on how that will go, and that depends a lot on anthropology. And I'm not an anthropologist. I think it's for anthropologists to respond, because there are good things in this crisis that I want to sustain. Actually, this habit of remote work, I think this sorts out so many problems related to, for example, traffic jams or coordination of kids and career for some members of the society. But from last summer experience, I would bet that there will be no change. I mean, as soon as COVID is proclaimed finished, then everyone will get back to their cars and will drive to their offices in same vast amounts as it was before. But that's for us just to see. So I think that basically the basics of economy is still there. The question is how stagnant that will be. I mean, is there actually a turnaround somewhere so that we can speed up the growth? So I would find those potential niches in those that I mentioned, in digital transformation, also in focus on businesses that we have really strong here but very small, and this life sciences and biosciences and this niche of the economy is so important, so productive, so able to save the world even at situations like that. But I think we need to invest more, and we need to push more on our strengths rather than trying to sort of split all the support that is possible across the business. What we need to split across the business is this approach that we should not over-regulate, we should not overburden, we should not over-control, and we should be a country where, you know, first and foremost decision is up for a person, and obligation of government is just to provide equal opportunities to the extent possible. So this is my, as a right-wing politician, I would not be willing to go around with a spoon and saying, don't you want this? I want a person to get the spoon and eat whatever he or she wants, but I know that I need to provide with a basic understanding how to use a spoon, because otherwise that's not going to happen. And this is most probably the priority of the government. Now, business will do its own job. I think we will have a lot of debate with business community, including this community that is here in the audience. We have public consultation on different aspects now. We had on green economy, on regions, on digital, on innovation. It's next week. So education, so whatever. Please do come join and give your hints and ideas, because sometimes when I read through the questions that I've read through, there is a question: what will you do for the sake of something? So my question to you is, what do you want me to do? and I think this is a very fair debate, where I can try and invent what is best for business, but it's always best where business comes and says that, you know, we think this might be different. And there will be some things that I've already thought about, for example, migration policy. Yes, this is something we are thinking and working hard about, but there might be quite well things that I've never thought of myself if you have not told me. So this is, I think, is the way for a productive government to maintain a fair debate with business.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm just getting a comment here from the chairman of the Danish Chamber of Commerce in Lithuania, Jan Hyttel. I'm not entirely sure whether I should read it all out, but he thanks both of us for the discussion, and he hoped to see me in Lithuania soon. I certainly hope to get back to Lithuania. I normally got to Lithuania a couple of times a year, but I haven't been in Lithuania for 2 years now, so I miss Vilnius and Kaunas and other places in Lithuania, and Lithuanian basketball. And then he's asking, Lars, what about a role advisor to Lithuania might not be needed? Ingrida might handle your common area with the department and the National Bank, well, I'm always happy to help out. But to wind it up, thank you very much for participating today, and thank you for all the participants here who've been listening in. Thank you for the questions. So on behalf of the Danish and the Norwegian, the Swedish, the German Baltic, British and French Chamber of Commerce, all 6 of them, thank you very much for participating. And Ingrida, I very much hope we can do this in person next year again. I know you can't commit yourself now, but I know there is a standing invitation.
Well, the parliament can expel me wherever my term, you know. And I see that somebody felt maybe a little bit, or I was misunderstood about the Brits. So I was not saying that Brits have left Europe for good and are now a part of some other region, but I really will miss Great Britain and United Kingdom around the table of European Union where decisions are being made, because the sober voice was quite an important voice in the choir of voices.
Exactly, I certainly know that. I will not share what you have been telling me in private about the British government in the past, but I can say it hasn't been all that negative, at least. So rather the opposite. So thank you very much to everybody. We will. I think this will be able to be downloaded and shared. Again, thank you very much, and hope to see you all soon in real person in Lithuania.
Have a nice day and good weekend. Bye.
Thank you.